For our second lab, we're going to do the flame test lab. The flame test lab is the most spectacular, most amazing lab you're probably going to do ever. What this lab shows is that certain metal ions glow different colors. You've seen this anytime you've seen fireworks. When a firework explodes in the sky and it explodes with a burning blue color, or red color, orange color, fuchsia, or anything, it's because they've introduced into the firework the metal ion that burns that color. We can use this chemical property of metal ions to identify them. For example, if I burn a certain element, metal ion, and I figure out it burns blue, I can use that information to identify one that I don't know that also burns blue. In fact, that's part of what we'll be doing. We're going to give you a couple of unknowns to compare against your list. For this to work properly, you have to make very careful observations of color. Here's why. This is fun and it's on video and you're going to be excited about it because it's a really cool lab. But when you sit down to write your report, your observations, the words you wrote down are going to be your eyes and ears. So the more descriptive you were about the color you saw, the better equipped you're going to be to make good observations and good answers in your lab report. I'm going to start by showing you the sort of lab setup that we use to test metal ions with a flame test. For starters, you get 2 beakers and you fill both of them halfway with water. It doesn't have to be exactly halfway. In fact, a little more than halfway is probably good. And one of these is going to function as the clean beaker, and one of them is going to function as the dirty beaker. The reason we do it that way is one of them we're going to use to get our wooden splints, which are basically just wooden coffee stirrers, a little wet so that the metal ions chemical will cling to them. Then we're going to light it on fire. We're actually going to put it in the Bunsen burner flame, which is going to produce some waste and some actual things that are on fire. We're going to use the second beaker to put those fires out. That's going to be our dirty beaker because it's quickly going to become contaminated with wood chips, burn material, and chemicals. The proper technique for this lab is to get the coffee stirrer, the wooden splint, a little wet. And the way you did that was at your lab station with your half-full beaker of clean water, the clean beaker. You stick the coffee stirrer into it, and then you come over to the student stock area and you just dip it in the salt. And as you can see, some salt will cling to it. That's plenty. You don't need any more than this. In fact, the more you put on here, the dirtier the experiment, but it doesn't change at all what happens. This is what we're going to light on fire. The way we're going to orient our lab station is we're going to take the designated dirty beaker and put it over by the Bunsen burner. The clean beaker we're going to hold away from the Bunsen burner. That way we can tell the difference. Although once we start the experiment, there won't be any question which one's which, as you'll see. The other skill we need to know here is how to light a Bunsen burner. So I'll remind you, since it's been a while since we've seen it. First thing I do is close the vent. I get the striker, which is used to light the Bunsen burner. I'm going to turn on the gas first until I hear a hiss. I don't need to open it all the way to get this done. As soon as you hear the hiss, you squeeze the striker to light the Bunsen burner. You can see there's a little bit of orange on this flame, which reminds me it's not a good flame. It has not enough oxygen. So to fix that, I open the vent. Finally, I adjust the flame height till it's around 2.5 or 3 inches. One of the things we also are going to have to do is we're going to have to use the proper technique to light these splints on fire. Since they're wet, you want to hold it in the hottest part of the flame, which you'll remember is right at the tip of that inner blue cone. Pay very close attention to this one, however. This is a wooden splint with nothing on it, because you're going to need to distinguish the flame color from the flame naturally given off when wood burns. In a scientific sense, this is our control group. Okay, this is what it looks like when you simply light a wooden splint on fire. It's sort of an orangish yellow flame. You're not asked to do anything here, just to use this as a reference. And then once I light the splint on fire, I just stick it into the dirty beaker and it puts out the flame. One thing that can help you distinguish between the flame color and the flames given off by the wooden splint is a piece of cobalt glass, which looks like this. It's dark blue in color. it may be helpful to look at the flame and the burning splint through the cobalt glass. We'll demonstrate that here. We've given you a white backdrop to use to accurately judge the colors. Remember, the more accurate, more detailed, and more specific your color observations are, the better equipped you'll be to handle the unknowns we give you at the end. We're going to show you each sample twice, both with and without the cobalt glass. This first sample, and the samples are in the order they're listed on your table, is copper 2. We've reduced the lighting in here a little bit to help with visualization of the colors. This is the second trial of copper 2. This is sample 2, magnesium powder, which you'll immediately recognize from the fireworks called sparklers. If they've given you more things to observe than just the color, you also should make a note of that. This is the second test of the second sample, magnesium powder. This is more obvious to the students who do this lab in person, but all of the next 5 chemicals that I'm about to use are all chlorides. That's important to answering the questions when we get to the end of this lab. In other words, the next metal ion is strontium, which means the chemical I'm using is strontium chloride. I'll also use calcium chloride, potassium chloride, lithium chloride, and sodium chloride. That's just to make sure you understand that the differences we see between them are because of the metals and not the anion. Okay, this is the third sample called strontium. This is the second trial of strontium. Remember, the more accurate, more detailed, and more specific your color observations, the better off you'll be when you get to the unknowns. The next sample is calcium ion. I do want to point out here that I'm mostly burning off as much of the sample as I can, so at some point the flame resumes the orange color it gets when just the wood by itself is burning, like in our control. Again, this is calcium. This is the second trial for calcium. Here you can see it resuming the yellow color of the wood burning. This is the potassium metal ion. Trial 1. This is potassium, trial 2. This is the sample lithium ion, trial 1. This is the lithium ion sample, trial 2. This is the last of the chlorides, in other words, the last of the powdered substances. This is sodium, trial 1. This is the second trial for sodium. The technique for testing metal ion in a wire is to use the crucible tongs and to hold the clamp in such a way that the metal wire faces away from you. You're also going to need to have a watch glass handy to set the magnesium in to burn itself out. Okay, this is magnesium wire. We're only going to do one sample of this one, so make the best observations you can. Now, one of the benefits of video, though, is you can go back. The other wire sample is copper. It's a thin piece of copper wire. You'll use the same technique to burn this. Put it in the crucible tongs facing away from you, and then after it gets really super hot, you're going to put it in a watch glass to burn itself out. Watch carefully. This one's not quite as spectacular as the last one. This is unknown sample 1. You'll use the data that you collected from all of the other ions to figure out what this ion is. We will do 2 trials of each of the 2 unknowns. This is unknown 1, trial 1. This is unknown 1, trial 2. This is the second unknown, unknown 2, trial 1. This is the second one, unknown 2, trial 2. Normally, when we do in-person labs, a lot of the stuff that you need to be able to do in order to fill out the lab report properly would be explained to you in class. But we're not going to have that opportunity this time. So here are some success tips for doing a good job on the lab report. The first thing is, what is your lab report? It should be a paragraph like you learned how to do in the video that showed you how to boil down the main parts of the prompt into a kind of paragraph describing what we're doing, why, and what are our objectives. Then you should have a table completely filled out with as much detail as you're able to come up with watching the video of the lab. And third, you need to answer the questions in complete sentences using the exact way we showed you. There's one other thing that would be really helpful though, since you weren't able to do this lab in person, and that is very carefully read the procedures. You'll notice that everything that's in the procedures was done by me, but some of the questions' answers come from those procedures. And the more familiar you are with them, the better job you'll do. I hope you enjoyed this lab. It is the greatest lab we do all year. It's quite a spectacle, and it certainly was fun for us to perform it for you. Have a great rest of your day, and please email us or chat us about any questions that you have on the lab.